people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Ahead of what is to be their showdown, their long-awaited, long-anticipated fight in September, Claressa Shields on Savannah Marshall stated, "Marshall's a bitch. That's it. She's a bitch. She's a hater. She wishes she was me. She wishes she had the belts, the gold medals, and she don't. Marshall just wants to be me. She wishes she was black and everything. It's just sad."
What are you supposed to say to that?
Savannah Marshall replied by saying, simply put, first class.
Since this fight's announcement, Claressa has said a couple of curious comments, curious quips about Savannah Marshall.
Things like, nobody knows Savannah Marshall, yet the fight with Savannah is happening in Savannah's neck of the woods, in Savannah's country, not Claressa's. And that if not for Savannah, who knows what Claressa Shields would be doing right now?
There's a genuine question there because Showtime dropped her off their platform, or she walked away.
However it happened, Showtime's investment in the career of Claressa Shields ended approximately a year, maybe a little over a year ago, and Savannah Marshall was boxing on a major platform, but Claressa Shields wasn't. The financing for this fight, it's not coming from Claressa Shields' side of things per se. It's coming from a UK-based network that is invested in the career of a UK-based fighter, a UK fighter, Savannah Marshall. Yet, according to Claressa, nobody knows Savannah Marshall.
Well, I don't think that's entirely true. I'd wager that some of the people that are going to be in attendance for this fight, in fact, most of
those people are going to be there to support Savannah. That's not saying that Claressa doesn't have fans in the United Kingdom. I'm sure she has one or two supporters, one or two fans out there, but the bulk of the people showing up are showing up to root Savannah on.
What, is that off base?
That's Savannah Marshall, a UK fighter from the UK who fights out of the UK on a UK-based network, might have more fans in the UK than Claressa.
What, is that off base?
I'm just giving it to you straight. It's the only way I know how to give it to you. And from where I'm sitting, it seems to me that if not for Savannah Marshall and having Savannah Marshall to fight, Claressa Shields might not even be boxing right now. She might have decided to go all in into the world of mixed martial arts.
She became soured with boxing.
She said it was sexist and misogynistic after her relationship with Showtime Boxing ended, and she wanted to go into mixed martial arts as a combat sport. And from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot like if she didn't have this Savannah Marshall fight,
if she didn't have this to do, this to build up, she might not even be boxing right now.
I think about the comments that Claressa Shields has made in reference to Savannah Marshall as a fighter, her career, this recent set of comments where she claims that Marshall just wants to be me. She wishes she was black.
I don't know what to make of that.
Seems off-key, just as off-base as her previous comments about no one knowing who Savannah Marshall is.
What about Savannah Marshall screams culture vulture?
She's not exactly Iggy Azalea or the meet me outside girl.
What has Savannah Marshall done or said to warrant a comment like that?
Savannah Marshall from Hartlepool. What about Savannah Marshall characterizes either being a culture vulture or cultural appropriation in any way, shape, or form? I mean, what exactly?
I really couldn't tell you.
Leave it to the American fighter to inject race in a conversation where it doesn't belong, because this fight isn't a race war.
This is a mental illness.
It's not. It's a boxing match. No more, no less.
I've already seen people start to react to Claressa Shields' comment,
asking if it were Savannah Marshall that said about Claressa what Claressa said about Savannah, what would people say?
So let me just say this.
I'm not going to pretend that this is your run-of-the-mill trash talk ahead of a fight, because it's not. I'm not going to pretend that sometimes Claressa Shields goes shooting off at the mouth and she's her own worst enemy. She shoots herself in the foot.
I'm not going to pretend she doesn't do that, because she does do that, and she does it all the time.
Whether she's aware of it or not. And Winning 2 gold medals in the Olympics and winning a good number of belts in the pro ranks doesn't exonerate her of...
That doesn't change how massively abrasive or cringeworthy she can be at times.
Really doesn't, though. Ultimately, it's a free country, and Clarissa Shields is free to say whatever she wants to say, and people are free to feel about it however they want to feel about it. It's a two-way street. Works both ways.
You can win 2 gold medals and a bunch of belts in the pro ranks, but people don't have to like you.
And they don't. That's why you're fighting in the other girl's home turf. That's why you're fighting in the other girl's country, because you didn't amass the fanfare in your own neck of the woods. And why didn't you amass that fanfare? Because of stuff like this.
There's gonna be people, they don't like that when they hear it, but it's the truth.
I don't give a fuck if you don't like it. It is reality.
Plain old reality. For years, people have been saying that Clarissa Shields is a massively abrasive fighter. So much so, she sometimes makes herself hard to like, hard to support.
What do you want me to do, sugarcoat it? I don't get paid to sugarcoat it. I'm gonna give it to you straight. Because it's the only way. I know how to give it to you. And like I said, Clarissa Shields is free to say whatever she wants to say, do whatever she wants to do, because it's a free country. And that's a two-way street that works both ways. While you're free to say whatever you want to say, whether it makes sense or not, people are free to feel about it however the fuck they want to feel about it. And they're not gonna like this.
They're not gonna step on eggshells because you won 2 gold medals or because you won a couple of belts in the pro ranks.
They don't have to accept this kind of rhetoric. They don't have to like you, suffer you.
Same way you don't have to make the least bit of fucking sense.
In other news, I'm sure most of you have heard by now that Daniel Dubois is suing Don King, alleging his purse still hasn't been paid from the Trevor Bryan fight.
This comes as a surprise to no one.
The real surprise was when Don King won the purse bid in the first place, because a lot of people didn't see that coming. Only in America. Or so Daniel Dubois has found out the hard way. An attorney filed a lawsuit on Dubois' behalf against Don King Productions on Monday night in Broward
County, Florida,
where Don King's promotional company is based. The British heavyweight alleges in court documents that King still owes him most of his 7-figure purse for his 4th-round stoppage of Trevor Bryan on June 11th in Miami. King promoted the card headlined by Dubois' victory over Bryan, who is represented by Don King. Dubois contends King still owes him somewhere between $463,000 and $938,000 for a win that was streamed as the main event of a pay-per-view show on King's website.
This had trouble written all over it as soon as Don King won that purse bid.
Trouble in paradise. The exact remaining amount of Dubois' $1.4 million purse that King still owes Dubois is unclear because Dubois' team doesn't know whether King paid his sanctioning fee to the WBA and or his taxes to the United States government. According to the lawsuit, a copy of which was obtained by BoxingScene.com, Dubois was contracted to pay 3% of his purse to the WBA for sanctioning their fight. Beyond that, $42,000, an additional 30% of Dubois' entire purse, or $420,000, was supposed to be paid to the IRS in accordance with U.S. federal law. For taxes as a foreign national, King was supposed to pay Dubois his net purse of $938,000 immediately after his fight. Before filing this lawsuit, Dubois' attorney made numerous attempts to collect his purse from King. In the 7 weeks since Dubois defeated Bryan, who was contracted to earn $1.7 million as the defending WBA world champion, there is no mention in the lawsuit as to whether or not Bryan's purse has been paid in its entirety. King submitted a winning purse bid of $3.1 million on March 21st to secure the rights to promote the Dubois versus Bryan bout.
If you actually took in this fight, if you took in this promotion, this Don King promotion, you never would have thought that somebody bid $3 million to host this thing.
Didn't look like any $3 million fight I've ever seen. Those two boys were fighting in a shoebox. He beat up Frank Warren's Queensbury Promotions, which represents Dubois. Queensbury bid $2.5 million. Bryan of Schenectady, New York, was due 55% of that winning bid, and 45% was supposed to be paid to Dubois. Dubois credited King for paying $475,000 of his total purse because Dubois was partially paid through a licensing fee from BT Sport, which televised Dubois versus Bryan in the United Kingdom and Ireland. That's why Dubois claimed that King owes him somewhere between $463,000 and $938,000, depending upon whether or not King paid the IRS and or the WBA on his behalf.
I don't know why Don King fought so hard to get the rights for this fight.
I really don't know why he didn't just let Frank Warren and BT bear the brunt, bear the cost of putting this thing on. He was so clearly in over his head, and this was expected.
From the moment that Don King won the purse bid, people were anticipating that he's going to try to stiff Daniel Dubois on the money.
But in order to participate in the purse bid, you've got to make a deposit, and Don King made that deposit.
I'm assuming he made that deposit, otherwise he wouldn't have been allowed to participate.
At which point, the rights to the fight would have went to the second highest bidder, BT Sport in Queensbury.
Like I said, I don't know why Don King fought so hard to get the rights for this fight.
I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know what his angle was. Did he figure that if he wins the rights to the fight, he can then sell those rights back to the people at Queensbury and BT? Is that what he was angling at? Is that what he was looking to do?
Did he think he could win the rights and then sell the rights back to BT and Queensbury?
Turn over a marginal profit? I really don't know. I don't know why Don King fought so hard to get the rights for this fight just for all of this to happen, but it's not surprising to anyone.
What it took to win the purse bid versus the actual production value of the fight, the way the fight looked,
the way it was promoted and where it took place, didn't look like a $3 million fight to me.
Now Don is in a bit of hot water because Daniel wants his money.
He's lawyered up to get it. It's safe to say that Don King is not the giant of industry, this industry, that he used to be. He used to be.
There was a time when the biggest fights in boxing, the biggest gala attractions were brought to you by Don King, but those days have long since passed.
Does he even have $400,000 or $900,000 to pay Daniel Dubois? Does he actually have that money?
These days, whenever Don King's involved, you can expect the situation to become more complex, more complicated.
I don't know if Daniel's ever going to get the money that he's looking for. I really don't.
Like I said, I can't say that I'm surprised. I can't say that I'm at all surprised we ended up here.
Other news, the Garcia versus Benavidez Showtime fight TV ratings are in, and it averaged 450,000 viewers, peaking at 478,000.
Approximately half the viewers they got for the Charlo versus Castano rematch, the Charlo versus Castano undisputed junior middleweight title fight.
We saw very similar viewing figures in the subsequent weeks that followed the Charlo versus Castano rematch when David Benavidez squared off against David Lemieux and brought in very similar viewing figures. A sharp decline.
It's a downward trend from what they brought in for the Charlo versus Castano fight. And what that fight indicates,
those viewing figures, is that the audience is still out there whenever you do put on an intriguing matchup, an intriguing fight, some fight of some substance, something of some note, something important, like an undisputed title fight versus this.
Fights like this, pointless filler fights like David Benavidez versus David Lemieux.
Danny Garcia versus Jose Benavidez. Let me remind you of something. What you're selling is intrigue. What you're selling is sizzle. At least that's what you're intended to be selling. An air of spontaneity, not quite knowing how a fight is going to end, and the viewer wanting the answer to that question, being able to witness it. And what the PBC often offers up in place of sizzle are pointless filler fights.
Pointless filler fights for fighters whose careers really aren't generating excitement in the sport, really aren't generating a buzz. Danny Garcia.
I guarantee you this. I can fucking guarantee you this. If it were Danny Garcia versus Jaron Boots Ennis, the viewing figures would have been more robust because that fight, unlike this fight, would have had an element of danger, an air of spontaneity. Would Danny Garcia be under threat of being stopped for the first time in his career? You can sell that.
And no, it's not because Jaron Boots Ennis has this big following.
It's not just because of Jaron Boots Ennis per se, but the PBC had to compete with another combat sport that same night, a UFC card.
And you can't compete with that with a pointless filler fight.
Playing it safe, it was Danny Garcia and his team who didn't think it was a priority to take on Terrence Crawford 2 or 3 years ago for Terrence Crawford's WBO title, what would have been a championship fight. So you didn't have any time for Terrence, but you got time for guys that he beat.
Think about that. Top Rank offered Danny Garcia about $3 million and a pay-per-view upside to come over to their side of things and fight Terrence on a pay-per-view show.
Obviously, the Garcia people didn't go that route, so that 3 years later they can find themselves opposite the ring a guy that Terrence beat 3 years ago.
On paper, this was a mildly intriguing fight, but the key word here is mildly.
Look at viewing figures like this and you start to ask yourself, how much longer is Showtime going to be in the business of boxing if things don't change?
Because they have to. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Everything costs. They put Danny Garcia in there with a Jose Benavidez. Somebody's paying for it.
Whoever that is, they're going to look at these viewing figures and they're going to ask themselves, what do we get out of this?
The matchmaking needs to be more ambitious.
And so so do the fighters. One fighter that can't be accused of being less than ambitious is unbeaten up-and-comer from Kazakhstan, Kakarot Janibek Alimkhanuli, who stated, "To be honest, I don't want Andrade to vacate the title. I want him to fight me. I want to knock him out. Being a champion without a fight is good, but knocking out a champion is better."
It's been some weeks since the order came down by way of the WBO for Demetrius Andrade to satisfy his mandatory challenger, Janibek Alimkhanuli.
And the most we've heard from Demetrius Andrade was a call-out he issued to Chris Eubank Jr., who's supposed to be in negotiations for a Conor Benn fight. We haven't actually seen Demetrius Andrade address the WBO's mandate or address Janibek's...
He hasn't addressed Janibek, and Janibek has been calling him out for months.
This goes back to what I said before. In order to drum up interest and business by way of interest, the matchmaking needs to be more ambitious, as do the fighters. Now, Janibek Alimkhanuli can't be accused of being less than ambitious when what he wants is to get Demetrius in the ring. But Demetrius...
he needs to show some moxie. He needs to show some gusto. He needs to deal with this guy.
Because the Zach Parker fight at 168 pounds, that ship has sailed, my friend. I don't think that fight's on the table for Demetrius anymore. And if he wants to remain a champion, he's got to deal with Janibek. He's got to deal with this guy, not unless he's prepared to surrender his title to Janibek in front of the eyes of the boxing community and the entire world.
What message does that send?
If he does decide to vacate his title, what would he be vacating it to do outside of skipping Janibek as an opponent? What, you got something better to do? You got something bigger lined up. What?
What do you got going on that you can't fight this guy?
Fighters themselves and their team likely wouldn't take kindly to this line of questioning, but these are the questions that people would have to ask if Demetrius were to vacate his title. That's just the truth. That's reality. If he were to forfeit his belt without a contest to Janibek Alimkhanuli, what people would ask immediately after that news breaks is, why'd he do it?
Why'd you give up your belt without a fight? You ain't got nothing else going on.
Why don't you fight this guy just as easily as you fought Liam Williams or Jason Quigley?
Maybe if you fight this guy and you beat this guy, you can work something out with Top Rank and ESPN to where you fight on their platform.
Maybe you can do that if you beat this guy, because one thing's for sure, if he gives up that belt without a contest, if he gives up that belt without a fight, he's up the creek without a paddle. A lot of people didn't want nothing to do with him before. If he gives up that belt...
even less people are going to want to deal with him now.
I don't know what he's going to do. It's been radio silence from Demetrius Andrade ever since he uploaded a video to his social media calling out Chris Eubank Jr. well after this order came down. This order from the WBO ordering Demetrius to satisfy his mandatory challenger. And a lot of people, they think he's going to vacate.
If he does, his stock takes a hit.
It could take a critical hit. You can snap at the journos for their line of questioning, but what you can't do is force people...
yeah, you can lash out at the media whenever they ask you a question that makes you uncomfortable.
If they were to ask Demetrius, what's he got going on? What's he so busy with that he can't take care of this guy?
I mean, you can snap at them, but people are still going to think what they think.
You give up that belt without a contest. You forfeit that title without a fight. People are going to think you're afraid of Janibek Alimkhanuli. People are going to think you finally found a guy that wants to fight you just as much as you've wanted to fight other people, and you hauled ass. You turned tail and got the hell out of Dodge. That's going to be the reaction if Demetrius vacates the title.
The only thing that could make it permissible to skip Janibek and vacate that title is if Demetrius had something bigger lined up, but we know that he doesn't.